Hey, everybody, welcome to SF Indie Fest. We've been bringing lots of independent films to the Bay Area for the last 2 decades, and this is the first festival that we've ever had to really kind of go all virtual for SF Indie Fest. So we're kind of wanting to bring our filmmakers to you in whatever ways possible. And so with that, we're kind of doing these pre-recorded Q&As between programmers like myself, Chris Metzler, and our filmmakers. So if we can welcome Heather Young, director of Murmur. Thanks for being here, Heather.
Well, thanks for having me virtually.
So maybe a good place to start is that outside of making a really wonderful movie, and thank you for sharing it with us, can you kind of tell us about the process with which you came up with the idea? Because it's a little bit, it seems like it was made in a little bit of a unique process compared to other kind of narrative films. So yeah, what inspired you to kind of run with this idea and make the film?
So the idea began around 2014. It started when I made a little short film called Howard and Jean. It was just a small film that I made totally on my own with my mom and her elderly Chihuahua, whose name was Howard. So I made that little film with her, and it was kind of exploring a codependent relationship between an isolated older person and their pet, in this case, Howard. And I started thinking more about that film and was wondering what the concept would look like if I took it to kind of a more extreme place, or, what's the furthest outcome that this story could have. And that's when I started getting the idea of, an animal hoarding type scenario, where a person uses pets to, to comfort themselves and to fill like a social void in their life. And in this case, I considered someone who kind of got addicted to that process, kind of has an addictive personality and can't really stop acquiring more and more animals. So that's where it came from.
And so is my understanding that you used a lot of non-actors in the making of the film, and how was that, experience in the sense of how much of things were kind of scripted versus kind of improv? And
yeah, we did use entirely non-professionals for all of the roles, including Shan McDonald, who was our lead. So basically, the way that I chose to work with the non-actors, I've been kind of moving towards that process in my short films previously. I've been working with non-professionals to kind of figure it out and figure out how I wanted to work in that way. And with Murmur, we did have a traditional script written. We needed to have one to get funding and everything like that. But when we actually came to production, I didn't give the script to the performers, so they didn't have any dialogue to memorize or anything like that. They all spoke in their own words, and just kind of explained to them, what the scene is about and what we had to get across, and what emotions we were dealing with. And I just encourage people to just be themselves. I think the most important thing for me when working with non-professionals is that they don't try to act. So the best thing, I think, you can get the best performances from non-actors when they're not acting. It's kind of a disaster when they start to try to act. That's when things can go terribly wrong. So I just try to encourage people to just be themselves and imagine themselves in whatever scenario I'm kind of placing them in. So it's like, how would you react, in this particular scenario? And with Shan, I knew I wanted someone who was a dog lover anyway, who in their real life, because I knew that was something that was fundamental to the character and that couldn't easily be faked, really. I needed someone who had this genuine, real affection for animals. And Shan is a huge animal lover. So she has 5 dogs, which a number of whom appear in the film. So yeah, that was basically the approach, to try to get, as realistic performances as we possibly could for the film.
Well, I think it turned out really great. What is it that kind of has attracted you to start kind of working with, non-professional actors? I mean, is there some sort of freedom that comes from it, or an authenticity, or what is it that, as a filmmaker has attracted you to that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both of those things. I started off, when I was in film school, thinking that, what I should be aspiring to is, the most experienced actors possible. And, I made a couple shorts after film school in that way, thinking, I should be trying to get, the most experienced actors I can. And I kind of started to become a bit intimidated by, all this language I was taught in film school that, that you're supposed to use when talking to professional actors. And, you have to use all these specific verbs, and there's all these rules about what you can say to them and what you can't say to them, how you can throw them off, and, all these kind of intense approaches. And I found that to be kind of a detriment to my process. It started kind of putting too much pressure on in terms of the way that I was communicating with performers. I started feeling, insecure about it. And that's when I kind of broke away from that and made that little film with my mom. And I felt like it turned out more authentic and more towards what I was striving for than the previous films I'd made with a more kind of traditional director-actor approach. So I decided to, pursue that and see where it went. So I did, two more films, two more short films in that style with non-professionals, and just kind of, using my instincts and using, whatever language felt appropriate, and kind of honing that style with the shorts. And then decided that when I was doing my first feature, I didn't want to, reinvent the wheel for the first time out with a longer piece. So I decided, this has been working for me, working with non-professionals. It's, going in the direction of authenticity that I was aiming for. So I decided to continue with that into the feature.
And how do you think that approach kind of affects the way your kind of visual storytelling choices? I mean, there's something kind of naturalistic about this film. Was that chosen based on the subject matter, or is it more of the kind of working environment you're doing? And also, I can't imagine with there being so many animals and stuff, is there, are you kind of, what's the kind of visual storytelling approach that you kind of chose for this, film, and what were the reasons behind that?
Yeah, for in terms of the visuals, it was, a real collaboration, I think, with Jeff, my DP. We did a lot of kind of discussion and planning in advance, but we didn't do storyboards or anything like that. I had ideas, for shots that I thought I would like for each scene that I kind of planned out in advance, but I didn't necessarily stick to that. The approach that I like to take in terms of, crafting the visuals is really location based. I really like to kind of immerse myself in the location, and specifically give myself and my crew enough time to really, look around and take everything in, and, try a bunch of different, setups until I find the shot that really speaks to me and really excites me. So a big part of achieving our visual style was just making sure in pre-production that we had planned enough time, because that's a huge thing for me. Like, if I'm super rushed to get something done, then I don't have time to allow myself to be immersed in my location and to basically look around me for every available, possible place I could put the camera until I find the place that I feel is the most exciting to me. So that was a huge thing for us, was to have enough time to explore our locations. And also, we decided to go with a static camera. So the camera doesn't move. there's no, tilts, pans, dollies, anything like that. It's all just locked off for every shot. And that was really helpful for me. It created an atmosphere that I was going for, kind of a stillness, isolation, kind of loneliness, but also it gave us a restriction, which I really like to do when I'm shooting. I like to have a restriction. So it kind of brings to the surface new ideas that you might not have had if you were open to doing anything at all with the camera. If you had no restrictions whatsoever, it can be kind of overwhelming. But I find that having a restriction kind of allows me to be creative in a different way.
Huh, that's cool. I can see how those choices kind of impact what you see in the final film in a good way, and really kind of set the tone for the story. And so it'd be remiss of me not to ask, but there's this whole Hollywood adage of don't work with animals and children. And so what was the situation like in having to juggle working with animals, and were there any particular challenges, or was there something that it brought to the set that made it fun in some sort of way?
I think both. I think it was both a challenge, but also a fun aspect to the set. We had a pretty low budget on this film. It was my first feature. So my producer basically said, you can have one crazy thing, but only one. And my one crazy thing was a whole bunch of animals. So in part, we were really lucky, luckier than I thought we would be in terms of having access to the animals. So we worked with a local animal shelter here in Nova Scotia that allowed us to film in their facility. And there were a lot of animals there that we were able to have access to film, which was really helpful. And then also we worked with a couple different like rescue groups, like organizations here in Nova Scotia as well. That helped us a lot with access to animals. So the lady who owns Charlie, who's the main dog, the little scruffy guy, the main dog in the film, she actually runs an animal rescue and she has a bunch of dogs. So we ended up using like a lot of her dogs, and then a lot of when we needed to bring in extra dogs, she would just kind of rally her troops. She has a whole community of like dog rescue people that have dogs. So they were happily bringing in dogs as like extras and stuff like that. So we really tapped into the dog rescue community that really just kind of rallied around us for the making of the film. And I don't know what we would have done without them, because they really allowed us to have some great animal actors. But yeah, the main thing that I kind of stick to, in terms of working with animals, people say it's very difficult, and of course it can be, but one thing that makes it easier and less intimidating, I think, for me, is that I never ask the animals to do anything that they wouldn't normally do. So they don't have to do any tricks, they don't have to jump up, they don't have to run across a table, they don't have to like do anything on cue. So you're never like, doing the shot over and over again, waiting for the dog to hit his mark and that type of, which would be, I think, very frustrating for a lot of people. And, you would need some really specific animals that had specific training. We didn't need any of that. The animals were just kind of existing, just being themselves. And sometimes we would, wait for, we'd be filming and, waiting around to see if, the hamster was going to do something or run on the wheel or anything like that. But overall, we were just kind of filming the animals as they naturally were. So we did have help. We had dog wranglers on a couple of the big dog days. But overall, it was pretty relaxed.
That's cool. I would have loved to experience that. So as we kind of wrap things up, can you kind of share, like, is there another kind of project you're working on, and how you're kind of dealing with kind of creative life in the pandemic, and how can we continue to kind of follow you in the film?
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely a challenging time. I think the pandemic. It's hard to stay motivated. I am writing a new script, but it's hard, I guess, in some ways. For instance, I like to kind of visit locations and meet people at the locations that I hope to film at, and I use that as part of my writing process. So, I get ideas for characters, I get ideas for different scenes from the locations themselves. So with the pandemic, that's been hard. I haven't been able to really visit any of the places that I would like to do research for the script. So that's frustrating. But other than that, I'm plugging away. Hopefully, at some point, we will be able to see people again and make movies. So yeah, it's I guess in some ways it's a good time to write because you're at home a lot. So so there's that. But yeah, in terms of Murmur, it's sort of winding down in terms of the festival run. We did a lot of virtual festivals, of course, because of COVID. So we're sort of winding down. We've started some online like streaming platforms in Canada, where we're based, just because we finished our festival run in Canada. We're still doing some international stuff, but yeah, it's on like iTunes and a couple streaming platforms in Canada, and then eventually we'll expand that to the States and the rest of the world as we wrap up festivals and stuff like that.
Well, great. Well, thanks again for making a wonderful film, but also kind of sharing it with SF Indie Fest. And for those of you in the audience, as I always kind of implore you, indie filmmakers depend on you to kind of help spread the word. So after you watch the film, go and share it on social media and let people know about this wonderful film Murmur that's out there. And Heather, so thanks again for joining us, Heather, and have a great day.
Well, thanks for having me.
Most definitely.